We are Commitment Central. Zahir Rainer makes his pledge live on this show. In the next hour, we'll find out where he's headed and what impact the top safety in Virginia will have on the school he chooses. Plus, KJ Bolden, that's a name you need to know. Why? Well, Steve Wiltfong joins the show to tell us. And we'll explore how New England went from talent desert to land of blue chippers. All that and more as the college football recruiting show starts right now. Alongside Blair and Gulo, I'm Emily Proud. Submit some questions in the chat for those new to the program. I see we have a lot of new people watching today. We do answer those questions at the end of the show, so be sure to submit them. The only way, though, you can do that is by subscribing to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. Make sure to do that. Also, like this video, please, so that we know you are watching. We're already up to 40 likes, Blair. I would like to hit 100 by the end of the show. So you go ahead, you hit that like button, and we're going to hit the headlines. Stay tuned. You will not want to miss this. Coming up, we have a live commitment from three-star safety Zahir Rainer. He is choosing between 7 finalists. Blair, whoever gets him, gets what?
An impressive safety prospect with an NFL pedigree. His father played linebacker at Virginia and then spent 7 years in the league. Zahir's a nickel type who can slide around to different parts of the secondary, so whoever lands him today is getting a toolsy, do-it-all defender with really, really good speed.
Excited to see where he lands. On our last show, you might remember, Bill Kurlick called it. Ohio State landing 4-star linebacker Peyton Pierce. That was Tuesday night. The Buckeyes' hot streak continues, and they are now up to double-digit commitments in the 2024 class. What kind of player did they just add here?
One of the top players in the state of Texas, a pure football player. Pierce plays in the box. He does a really good job of feeling out gaps, disengaging from blockers, maintaining leverage to get after the football. So he's an all-you-can-want type of linebacker. Also plays some quarterback, so Ohio State is adding a smart and athletic defender to the mix.
Interesting. All right, meanwhile, Georgia landing 3-star wide receiver. 5-star name, though, Nitro Tuggle. The wideout picked the back-to-back national champs over rival Auburn, Penn State, Michigan, among others. Kirby Smart now has 12 commitments in the class. Blair, with a name like Nitro, I'm expecting an explosive player. What did Georgia just add to its arsenal?
It's a shame, Emily, that he's not going to Ohio State to catch balls from Air Noland. We'd have an Air Nitro connection. Nitro's a phenomenally explosive receiver. He's got wiggle. He's got the ability to separate from defenders. I love his ability to change directions. Still has to fill out some and add some more muscle, but Georgia is adding a really talented playmaker to this class.
When have we heard that before? Meanwhile, a 5-star visit update. Wide receiver Mike Matthews, the number 10 player in the class, is fresh off a visit to Clemson. The Tigers are battling against the likes of Alabama, Georgia, USC, Tennessee, and of course a whole lot more for his services. Speaking of more, let's talk more about this with our director of recruiting. That's Steve Wiltfong. Steve, what are you hearing coming out of that visit, and what's next?
Another terrific visit for Mike and his family. I got a chance to talk to him and his mother after the trip. Mike highlighted the truly big family among the players and the coaching staff. Really enjoyed sitting down and talking with Coach Dabo Sweeney and taking in some words of wisdom from him. And he's been making the rounds lately. He's been back at Georgia, been back at Alabama, been to Auburn. Actually got a chance to go visit North Carolina and NC State recently. Going to take an official visit to USC in June. They're a major contender. But we know Clemson's way in this one. It's been one of his favorite schools since the process started. And his mom, Regina, said the coaches and staff have always shown us love. And we always see why Clemson is such a unique place. We watched the team practice, sat down with Coach Sweeney, Coach Tyler Grisham, new offensive coordinator, Coach Garrett Riley quite a bit. Program has a long-standing history for success, she said, and development of players on and off the field. And the current players also made an impact on both Mike and his family, spending a lot of time with them. So Clemson's in the middle of this one. I expect him to take his official visits before deciding. I would imagine Clemson gets one of those. Clemson is gearing up for a big recruiting weekend, the first weekend of June. That's when they're trying to bring in all their top targets. So wouldn't be surprised if we see Mike Matthews in there that weekend if he doesn't have a conflict with AAU basketball or something else.
Steve, we talked QB dominoes on the show earlier this week, and one player we're keeping an eye on is Luke Moga, the 2024 quarterback from the state of Arizona. You broke the news that he intends to announce his college decision on April 28th. The crystal ball right now favors Oregon. Why are you leaning with the Ducks for the West Coast signal caller?
Well, I think that's a staff that he's really hit it off with. Offensive coordinator Will Stein and Dan Lanning and company. They were one of the first schools to really prioritize Luke Moga and put him near the top of their board. Oregon, they're looking for quarterbacks that can create and make things happen when they're under duress, guys that can extend plays, guys that can get chunk plays with their legs. And Luke Moga and Hoss Haney, who's committed to TCU, those are the two most dynamic guys in the class at the position, in my opinion. Luke Moga's got 10.5 speed in the 100-meter dash. He's a guy that's still developing as a passer, but we see all the traits and upside there as well. So he's a guy that Oregon covets. I think he's going to visit there later this month, and I love where the Ducks stand coming into his decision. Oregon is the nation's number 6 class right now, guys. A little bit of breaking news. They just flipped a defensive lineman from Missouri, Tioni Gray, who was committed to Missouri for a month, visited Oregon last weekend, jumped in the fold for the Ducks today. We're expecting a hot April for them. He's the third to commit this month, joining safety Aaron Flowers and offensive lineman Trent Ferguson. We like them for Moga, and I think several more could commit to Oregon before this month is out.
Wow, we love the breaking news. And if you thought this conversation was the most exciting one that you've had this week, probably not, because you recently spoke with, USC head coach Lincoln Riley. You can find that conversation online at 247sports.com. Highly recommend you do that. At the end of the show, please, Steve, give us a taste right now. What were one or maybe two big takeaways that you got from that conversation?
Well, our conversation started with their late recruiting win of Duce Robinson, landing the nation's #1 tight end in the country. And this was a class that was bookended by 2 5-stars. 2 days after Coach Riley took the job back in 2021, his quarterback followed him, 5-star quarterback Malachi Nelson. And then they end the class 16 months later with Duce Robinson. And talking to Coach Riley about that, the West Coast was a place where programs like Oklahoma, schools where Lincoln Riley, they could come out to the West and land a blue chipper or two because USC was down. Well, USC's not down anymore. They were a Pac-12 championship game win away from making the college football playoff. They've now recruited 2 straight top 5 portal classes. This recruiting class with Duce Robinson in the fold, #1 in the Pac-12, #8 nationally. This is a program on the rise. And with Lincoln Riley in the corner office, Dan Lanning even in the corner office at Oregon, it's going to be harder for programs to come out west and poach guys like Duce Robinson. USC's class has Malachi Nelson in the fold. They have the #1 receiver in the country in the fold, and Zachariah Branch, who they beat Ohio State for. They flipped the offensive lineman Elijah Page from Notre Dame. They beat Georgia for 2 tight ends, not only Duce Robinson, but Walker Lyons. And Lincoln Riley, he prides himself on being one of the big relationship builders with their top targets, not just to land these guys, but to also build the foundation and trust with them that when they get to USC, they can coach them hard and help them get where they want to go. But they have that trust with them because they have that long-standing relationship from the recruiting process with Lincoln Riley heavily involved there. And then look, the other player that I know they love a lot of guys in this class. They love their offensive line class. They love the way that they've addressed the front 7 on defense. The skill player class is as good as it gets nationally. But Tackett Curtis, speaking of that front 7 class, was their #1 linebacker in the country on the board. And we talked about USC and their brand and being able now to keep top players out west home. But it's also a program that can go across the country, go into Louisiana, and beat the likes of Ohio State for Tackett Curtis, who's already turning heads for them in spring practice, not only as a performer on the field, but as a guy that's eventually going to be a leader of that defense.
Steve, staying with USC, the Trojans have their spring game this weekend. Who are some big names that you're expecting to make it to the Coliseum?
Well, as USC tries to land a second straight top 10 recruiting class here, top 247 running back Taylor Tatum, our number 2 running back in the country, is one of the headliners this weekend, and he's excited to get back out to campus. He's been in great communication with Coach McDonald, of course, Coach Riley. He's looking forward to seeing the spring game in the offense, but he's just developed really strong relationships with the Trojans, and I think that they are one of the front runners in this recruitment coming into the visit. They're also hosting the number 2 running back in 2025, number 3 running back in 2025, Jordan Davison from local Mater Dei, but some other big names in the 2024 class that are expected out there this weekend. You have in-state safety Jason Mitchell from St. John Bosco. USC's already trending towards he's already trending towards USC on the crystal ball. You have the number 6 tight end in the country, a top 100 player in our rankings, Walter Matthews, coming out from the Peach State. The number 1 interior offensive lineman in the land, DeAndre Carter from Mater Dei, will be there. A couple more 4 stars, Blair. You got Marquand McCraney from Washington State Highline High School. And then you got Marquise Gallegos from in-state there, Chaminade. So USC hosting some top targets this weekend. Also Braylon Conley, a corner from Texas. Makai Sena, an offensive lineman from Texas.
Another school expecting a big turnout at their spring game this weekend is Florida. You got 5-star safety Xavier Filsaime. He is expected to attend, but you actually put in a crystal ball for him to Florida yesterday. So what has you leaning Gators before he even heads to Gainesville this weekend?
Well, he's long been leaning towards Florida, in my opinion, based on the intel I have. Now, Florida's had some transition on their defensive staff, but I think he's hit it off with the new guys there and loves Coach Billy Napier, of course. And this is a Sunshine State native that's always loved the Gators. He's had terrific experiences at Florida before. Obviously, he's back for today's spring game, and I just like the way it's trending for Florida. And when you look at this Florida class that's in the top 10 right now as well, this is a program that's trying to turn around a defense that ranked number 96 nationally last year. And I love the way they're recruiting linebackers with Miles Graham and Adarius Hitman Hayes in the fold. Hitman Hayes is one of my favorite players in the country, regardless of position. And if they can add Xavier Filsaime to that, that'd be a heck of an early defensive haul for Billy Napier and company. And I like the way it's trending coming into his visit this week.
2 more to discuss with the Gators, 5-star edge Colin Simmons and the nation's number 1 running back, Jarrett Gibson. What's the latest with both of them as Florida tries to make a move in their recruitments?
Yeah, in addition to trying to get Colin Simmons in for this week's spring game, they're also trying to get him back in June for a visit then when he could be joined by his mom, Monica McCarley, who's a key part of his decision process. But it's Coach Mike Peterson that's keeping the Gators alive in this recruitment as they battle so many of the nation's heavyweight programs. I know he's high on LSU, high on Texas, just had a great visit to TCU. Colorado's in the mix here, Alabama, Tennessee, or some other programs he's spoken highly of, and then certainly don't sleep on Texas A&M for Colin Simmons as well. But Florida hanging around in there, and it's Mike Peterson leading the charge, and then Jarrett Gibson, the number 1 running back in the land. He's a Gainesville native. He's been several times. Was there earlier this spring. Was there earlier this week. Now back for the spring game. I think Florida trails some schools here. Texas is the crystal ball favorite. He's going to be back in Austin this weekend. And then Miami's a program that I think is on the rise for Jarrett Gibson as well. But Florida, all you can do right now is hang around in this recruitment, keep getting them to campus as many times as possible, see what the season looks like this fall. And perhaps Jarrett Gibson, who at one point was committed to Florida, it was his first offer, and he jumped on it shortly after. Maybe his recruitment comes full circle way down the road.
All right, Steve, before we get to your War Daddy pick this week, it's a good time as ever to ask the people for some likes. We have over 350 people watching right now. So yeah, that's what the like button looks like, and only 60 likes. I told you my goal at the beginning of the show is to get to 100. I think that's easy, so if you've not hit that like button, go ahead and do it. All right, so you have selected KJ Bolden as your War Daddy, the number 1 safety in the 2024 class. Before we talk about his recruitment, though, what is it about Bolden's game that has our rankings crew labeling him as the top safety in this cycle?
Well, he's one of the most versatile defensive backs in the country. He's a guy that can play safety. He can play nickel. You can put him on an island at corner. He's a fluid athlete that can really run. He's also a two-way standout for one of the best high school football programs in the country. He could be highly recruited at receiver, but he has a special skill set in the secondary. And he's finished third in the triple jump in the state. He's been a state champion in the 4x1. He's got 10.7 speed in the 100-meter dash, so he can really run. He's a fluid athlete, a space eater on the back end that brings a lot of versatility to your secondary. And in addition to all those traits, I mean, he's just an incredible leader. He's the guy that the Buford football team looks for in that standpoint as well. You know, I talked to his mom. She talked about how dedicated and passionate he is about everything he does. And then I talked to his head football coach, Brian Appling, who, called him a special kid on and off the field. This is a young man that wakes up at 5:45 in the morning to get his mile running. Then he gets over to the school at 6:30 for his workout. How does he get there so fast? Lives across the street. Coach can look out his side office door and he can see KJ's house. So he's got the convenience of Buford's beautiful football facilities right across the street from him. And he takes advantage of it, gets in there, gets his workouts in, leads by example, leads vocally. So in addition to the tangibles, he's got all the intangibles coveted at the position, comes from a great family, and these college football programs love him.
Those early mornings have been paying off, Steve. Over 40 scholarship offers, a who's who of college football on that list, including Georgia, Ohio State, Auburn, Florida State, many others still pursuing KJ Bolden as well. But what's next in his recruiting process?
Well, Florida State was first to offer him back in July of 2020. So he was one of the very first players in this class to see his recruitment go national. And with that, he's been making game visits for years. He's been on these campuses so many times. I think there's a little bit of a pecking order going into the next round of visits. He's going to be at Georgia for the Bulldogs spring game this weekend. I think that they've set the tone in this recruitment. I think that they're the one to beat with the standard that their program has, proximity to home. I think people in his family love Georgia. They love Kirby Smart. And look, Georgia's recruiting him as hard as anybody on the board, from Kirby Smart to Fran Brown on down. And so I like where Georgia stands for KJ Bolden as he returns to Athens this weekend. I think that Alabama is another school that's in really, really good position for him. He has told me before that Bama is legendary. You're always going to get the best coaching, and who wouldn't want to play under Nick Saban? He's been to Ohio State several times. He went to their season opening win against Notre Dame, returned for their game against Michigan. He's got an official visit locked in for June. I know he's in regular touch with Perry Eliano, Ryan Day, and that staff. He feels really good about Ohio State's future. The Buckeyes have the #2 recruiting class in the country, and I think that they are very much in that one as well. A couple of other schools that I know are on the short list for KJ Bolden: Clemson. He was recently back there, loves the culture at Clemson. It was one of his dream schools. Is really connected with Dabo Swinney. He's talked about the graduation rate there. And look, his mom said, look, we're on a 3-year plan, and that's also academically want to graduate him in 3 years. Clemson's 98.6% graduation rate, looking sexy to KJ Bolden and his mom. And the 100% employment rate at graduation is amazing. Those are a couple stats that he threw out at me, so no question he's looking at Clemson deep. Auburn's a program that did not make his top 15, that he dropped at the start of the year. He's taken 2 visits there this spring, and each time he leaves, he's wanting for more. Can't wait to get back. Between Hugh Freeze, Zach Etheridge, that program on the rise, the new facilities, just all the juice and excitement that new staff has on the Plains. It certainly caught KJ Bolden's attention. He was there this past weekend for their spring game, and Mother Nature downpouring on Auburn certainly didn't dampen his experience on Auburn's campus. Florida State and Arkansas are 2 more that are in there. Florida State was one of his dream schools since he was little. They were first to offer him. And with that, Arkansas coach Marcus Woodson started that relationship at Florida State. He's now at Arkansas. KJ went out to Arkansas this spring. I know he really enjoyed his time out there as well. So they're in the mix for an official visit.
A lot of great information there. The important takeaway, though, is if I want to be an elite athlete, I just need to live across from a really nice gym. Is that right, Steve? That set me up for success.
Right across the street from high school.
Love it.
Straight beeline, the coach's office there. which might
Perfect.
not be a good thing sometimes. Probably a good thing for KJ Bolden all the time, but maybe
Yeah.
not every defensive player.
That's true. It seems like he can definitely handle himself, though. It's working out quite all right. Steve, thank you so much. Appreciate the intel.
Yep, take care, y'all. Hit the like buttons.
Yes, hit that like button. Speaking of, we have already hit 100. You guys are awesome. You know what that means. I'm just going to ask for 200 now, so keep smashing that like button. We'd love to hear from you. Love to hear that you're watching. Another thing you need to add to your watch list, though, is new episodes of the Wiltfong Whip Around. You can see them right here on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. They're dropping every Monday and Friday. And don't forget, we are just minutes away from a live commitment. Zahir Rainer will make his college pick live right here on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. Stick around for that, but more content here from afterthought to talent haven. National recruiting analyst Brian Dohn says New England suddenly matters in college football recruiting, and the numbers kind of agree with him. 6 prospects in the top 247 came out of the Northeast region in the 2023 cycle. That's more than the last 3 cycles combined. Why is that? Well, here's a conversation all about it with Brian and Blair.
So, Brian, earlier this week, you put a really interesting feature together over at 247sports.com, and I invite our viewers to go check it out. It details the rise of recruiting prospects in the New England region, and there's been an influx, Brian. And just off the bat, why do you think the states of Massachusetts, Connecticut, and others have seen a rise in recruiting prospects and high-level talent?
Yeah, it's a really complex answer that you can't just point to one thing. And so, look, I've been doing this for more than a decade, going up there and seeing kids and speaking to coaches. And I spoke to a lot of the coaches about it, just in terms of why do you have more high-end talent, right? When you look at the last 2 classes, there's everybody's going in to recruit Alabama, Michigan, Ohio State, Georgia, Clemson, Miami, Penn State, everybody's in there. And so there's a bunch of different reasons. One, there are a ton of boarding schools in Connecticut and Massachusetts. And like a lot of the Catholic schools that are just day schools across the country, they've figured out, hey, if we have a good sports team, especially football, that draws a lot of attention. It brings in a lot more people, and we can showcase our school. They're able to appeal to the world. I mean, you got kids from Europe coming over. Olis Allen in the 2023 class was from Finland, wound up going and signing with Alabama. You have that. You have the natural benefit of boarding school is maturity, and they also have them repeat a year. I was speaking with the coach at Choate Rosemary Hall, which is in Wallingford, Connecticut, and he's been there for 15 years, and he was telling me, listen, when you go back 15 years, and most of the schools fielded football teams with post-grads to where you had maybe 14, 15, 16 kids on your team who were post-grads. A lot of them would play both sides of the ball, so there weren't a lot of kids. And we know in recruiting, you're not really coming to look at post-grads. You're pretty much filled by then. And he said, now kids are coming in, and they're coming in as sophomores and repeating their sophomore years, or they're coming in as juniors and repeating their junior years. And so there's more talent. The talent is more mature. And, they're also doing a great job of working together. There's showcases being put together next month, in May, where on a Monday, I think it's May 15th, there's 6 or 7 stops in Connecticut, all staggered time, so college coaches can go watch kids work out. And the next day in Massachusetts, they're doing the same thing. So there are a lot of different things going into it. But I think it's identifying players earlier. There's more training organizations now. There's more of a focus on football and developing kids. Coaches know how to get the word out. They also speak about social media and how kids can now present themselves to schools and a little easier to find. And, the post-grad stuff and the reclassing, I think it all works together and feeds into one another.
Brian, you cover the East Coast for 24/7 Sports, and there are different pockets up and down the region, right? You have the Carolinas, you have the DMV area, you have Jersey, New York, but New England, I think specifically, you mentioned it, right? There's a cohesion, I think, among the schools to, I think, in a way, market their players and to rise up their own prospects. And they've been working together to really bring in more talent and to showcase that talent. How are they working together? How are they able to make this work and I guess in a way make this about the recruits?
Yeah, and it's funny because I was speaking to a couple coaches about that for the last few days. You know, Blair, can you imagine like out in California, does Mater Dei work with St. John Bosco and Long Beach Poly to stagger their workouts so college coaches can go from one school to another for a day? You don't get that a lot of places, but you look at what they're doing in New England, and I was just looking at the first day on May 15th, and it takes a lot of coordination to do it, and willingness and desire to help each other. And so on May 15th, and I, you guys know me, so this is not good for me, but it starts at 6:30 a.m. at Choate in Wallingford, Connecticut. And then I think the next one's 7:45 at Cheshire Academy, which is maybe 15 minutes from Choate. And then you go drive an hour south to the Brunswick School, and they have it, and it just continues throughout the day. So they stagger it so these coaches can get from place to place. And for the Ohio State fans out there, Miles Walker, the offensive lineman, they signed out of the Brunswick School. This is where Ohio State saw him last year. Last year was the first year they were doing it. Ohio State decides to pop in and watch this kid work out, and lo and behold, he commits to Ohio State. He signs with Ohio State, and the guys at whether it's Avon Old Farms or Loomis or Taft School, Suffield Academy, nobody's like, oh, I don't want him to go to Brunswick School because they're going to see somebody there and maybe it doesn't benefit my kid. They're all in it together to get the most visibility. And I think it's a great thing just in the sense of, listen, nobody as a program wants to go to an area and recruit one kid. It's time consuming. It's not the work smarter deal. So you have the schools in New England working with each other to come up with schedules when things will fit. And again, you're talking about a lot of boarding schools, which means these kids have to be able to get out of classes to do these workouts at a certain time. And so there's a lot of moving pieces and a lot of working parts, and they're all willing to work together to get that stuff going. And I mean, St. Thomas More is a perfect example. They're, kind of on the other side in Connecticut, not along the corridor of Choate and Cheshire and all that, but they want to make sure that they're involved in this. So they're willing to have their workout whenever is needed. It's just stuff like that they're trying to benefit everybody. And they figure if everybody benefits, that means their kids are benefiting too. It's very unselfish. It's very nice to hear, especially in this day and age when there's so many people out there just for themselves.
It's cutthroat out there, Brian, and I think these schools being able to work in unison for the recruit and for the marketability of their schools, I think it goes a long way. And we've seen results in recent classes, right? It's been a great era in New England. There's, I think, 7 new 4-stars here in the 2024 class. There were 7 4 or 5-stars in the 2023 class. And we are in a great era in New England, but where is there still growth or room for growth?
I mean, everywhere. I mean, this is only the tip of the iceberg. So, one of the schools that you're going to be hearing about on the recruiting scene in about 2 years is Tabor Academy up in Massachusetts, because Jeff Moore, who built St. Thomas More, who built Loomis Chaffee, is a UMass grad, went to UMass for a year to be on Don Brown's staff there, decided to jump back to the high schools for family reasons. He's at Tabor, and I expect them to be loaded in 2 years. But are more people going to do this? Are more schools going to say, okay, listen, not only can we look for kids here in the United States, I mean, you talk about Cheshire Academy, who has, Jacob and Gerard Smith in the 24 class, who are from North Carolina, right? I mean, they spent a lot of time in Kentucky and also North Carolina. Dante Reno, the son of the Yale Yale coach Tony Reno, Dante is a quarterback commit with South Carolina. He's from Massachusetts. He's going to school now at Cheshire Academy, also to be closer to dad and everything too, because Yale is right there. But these boarding schools offer different kinds of opportunities than a lot of other places maybe can offer. And you're also talking about, the education aspect of it, where, yeah, you can go play football, you get the visibility, the level of football is rising in the private schools, but you can also get that Ivy League prep education. And so I think for the boarding schools, it's just keep pounding it, get better and better, bring in more talent. And then the public schools, they have to find their mark in it, and they have to figure out a way to market themselves a little bit more. There's a few of them out there, especially Everett School in Massachusetts, just outside of Boston. They always have kids. Mike Sammerstill, who's playing at Michigan, is from there. TJ Guy was from there. There's plenty of guys that are available in the public schools, but it's maybe not as visible. And then I look at another thing is I think this will be the third year of it. It's the Bone Camp, Best of New England, up in Massachusetts. They do it at Springfield College in June, and they're doing a better job of getting colleges up there to see these kids. And you're talking about 700 kids from New England coming to work out. And so it's just getting organized in that way too. And I think it just takes time. I've seen this stuff happen in Philadelphia. I've seen it happen with New York City with getting more organized, and it's happening now in New England. And I think for me, it should just be the beginning, right? This shouldn't be, boy, this is as good as it's going to get. You should always be able to replenish some talent. And now it's like, let's get some of the public schools even more involved in it. And I know, like Darien in Connecticut, they do a good job too, but let's just, more people need to get involved in it on a public scene too.
A number of high-profile college programs. We're talking about Georgia, Michigan, Penn State, Miami, Notre Dame, just to name a few, will be up there in the spring evaluation period. Maybe not at 6:30 in the morning, jostling with Brian Dohn for position there on the sideline, but it's going to be a really interesting spring as schools start to begin capitalizing on all this talent in the New England region. Brian, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you very much.
Decision day has arrived for Richmond, Virginia's own Zahir Rainer. The top safety in the state out of Trinity Episcopal School has received over 30 offers from around the country. In his junior season, he accounted for 3 interceptions, including a pick 6. The ball hawk helped lead his team to back-to-back Division I state titles and an undefeated 2022 campaign. Rainer has narrowed his decision down to a handful of finalists: Wake Forest, Minnesota, North Carolina, Virginia, Duke, Stanford, and Virginia Tech. But now, that final 7 gets whittled down to 1. Will he follow in his dad Wally's footsteps and suit up for the Virginia Cavaliers? Or will he blaze a trail all his own? We're about to find out. It's that time. I'm so excited to welcome in Zahir Rainer to the College Football Recruiting Show. Zahir, thank you so much for being here. How you doing?
I'm all good. How about yourself?
We're doing great. We love these live commitments. So excited that we've got you on the show. Before we get to your commitment, though, we're going to ask you a couple questions. You have been able to visit your finalists throughout this entire process. So when you went on those visits, what were some important factors that went into your decision?
Obviously, just, the opportunity to play, the opportunity to compete for a job. And another thing is just, make sure I feel comfortable with the coaching staff, with the city I was around, with the people I was with. And obviously, education. Both my parents graduated from the University of Virginia. So just that opportunity just played a huge role.
Zahir, we know that this day is not just about you, it's about everyone that helped you get to this point and the journey to get to a commitment. We don't see many people there, but we've been told that there are dozens of people at your announcement. Who are some folks that you have to thank for getting you here?
First and foremost, I want to thank my parents. I want to thank my grandmother. I want to thank my brother, both my brothers and my sister, and everybody watching this. Obviously, everybody in this room means the world to me. And I could keep going on and on, but those are just.
I'm sure it is a long list of people, but there's also a lot of people watching right now that want to know where you're headed. So this is the moment that we've all been waiting for. A lot of great options. The floor is yours. Zahir, where will you be playing your college ball?
First and foremost, I want to thank God. I want to thank all my friends, all the coaches that helped me. Coach K, may God rest his soul. Everybody helped me to this point. I want to thank Trinity for having me the opportunity to play at a high level with some of the best players in the world. Finally, I want to thank my grandmother for always being there for me, for being a stand-up person when I needed her. And I would thank my older brother for being a role model for me to model my game after. And with that being said, I would be committing to University of Minnesota.
Oh.
I knew it.
I love it. I love it. I heard somebody yell in the background. I knew it. We did not know it. Zahir, you mentioned that your parents went to Virginia. So what was it about Minnesota that led to you putting on that hat and committing?
Obviously, just given the opportunity to play with some of the best people in the world. Coach Fleck's culture at Minnesota is amazing. Coach Rossi and Coach Collins, I know under their tutelage I can be, the best player I can be on and off the field. Obviously, one of my favorite players of all time, Antoine Winfield Jr. went there. Huge inspiration for me, and I know, under that defense, I can be a great player.
Zahir, there's a ton of Minnesota fans tuning in to watch you make this announcement. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of Gopher fans that will also go back and watch this on replay, on loop, over and over again. So what is your message to that fan base about the type of player that Minnesota is getting?
They're getting a soldier. They're getting a man that will do anything and everything to win. Getting somebody to do every job the coach asked them to do. Getting a hard-working citizen. Not only that will go to class, but also, stand up in the community and, find a great leader, a great player, and a violent player at that.
Woo! I love it. Zahir, if you could see the chat right now, there's a lot of row the boat. I think a lot of people are very excited that you were joining the fold. Congratulations. I know a lot of hard work led up to this day, so go enjoy it with all the people that we heard celebrate with you behind the scenes. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. I appreciate y'all.
All right, so there you have it. Rainer adds to an already very strong Gophers class. He marks the 9th commitment in the 2024 cycle so far. The safety is the first secondary player to join the group. Maybe he can bring some more of his friends to build that up. The Gophers now have a top 20 class. So what about that? Let's go ahead and head that way to get more reaction from this commitment. Ryan Burns, the publisher of Gopher Illustrated, joins the show. Good timing to have you in here. Ryan, Zahir Rainer just making his commitment official, a big win for PJ Fleck in really an area that the program we don't see dip into all that often. So how was this staff able to go into that unfamiliar territory and land this pledge?
Well, I'll tell you, I've been covering this team for 12, 13 years now, and I don't think I can ever recall a time where Minnesota lands a Virginia player, let alone one that both Virginia Tech, Virginia, obviously his parents went there, and then you have national powers at times like Stanford. But I think the way Minnesota was able to do it was just being early and then being consistent, because this journey with Minnesota and Zahir started 15 months ago when they offered him, when they were going after his teammate at the time, Cameron Fleming. They ultimately don't end up landing Fleming, but he goes to Virginia Tech, but they were able to get their foot in the door with Zahir. And then you heard it from Zahir himself. He models his game after Antoine Winfield Jr., obviously a former Golden Gopher. That's where the stature is very similar, and that's what Minnesota has pitched him, that you can come in and be an immediate impact guy like Zahir, like Antoine Winfield was for us. Because if you look at the last 2 free safeties that Minnesota's had, in Antoine Winfield and now current safety Tyler Nubin, who was all Big Ten, both guys are going to be playing in the NFL. So I think that pitch alone really resonated with him.
9 commitments now in the 2024 class, a top 20 class nationally. And Ryan, not to, I guess, maybe look down on this latest commitment, but I think everyone wants to know what's next. So who is PJ Fleck now targeting? What does this class look like in terms of the recruiting board?
Yeah, there's a lot of expectations within the state of Minnesota yet, where there's a lot of guys with really good offer lists, guys like Emerson Mandel, an offensive lineman from the Twin Cities here, who has picked up offers from Penn State, Texas A&M, Oklahoma in recent weeks, someone that has been a long-time priority for them. You also look at Eden Prairie defensive tackle by the name of Mo Sane, someone that the Gophers just also recently offered. And then the 2 big fish still on the board here in the state of Minnesota are Esco safety Coy Parrish, and then you have Rogers defensive lineman Wyatt Gilmore. Again, there aren't traditionally a ton of 4-star guys here in the state of Minnesota, but all 4 of those guys will have been on campus here in the month of April and PJ Fleck's hoping that that border around the state of Minnesota gets a little taller each year he's here, and that's where going into year 7. Minnesota's got a realistic shot at all 4 of those guys, and they're hoping to land them because they've been longtime targets.
Oh yeah, anytime we talk Big Ten, it's all about how the conference is expanding, which means the recruiting footprint is expanding. Really big win for Minnesota today. Thank you so much, Ryan. I appreciate you being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
For more coverage, because as he just said, there's going to be a lot more coverage down the road. This is just the beginning for Minnesota. You can read more about this latest commitment and all things Gopher football and recruiting at gopherillustrated.com. Guys, so many people are watching. So many people enjoyed this live commitment. I think you can tell that we enjoyed it just as much as you did. If you have not already hit that like button, go ahead and do it. Even if Zahir didn't choose your school, show some support for the young man, because a very exciting day for him. So congratulations again to him, and thank you all for watching. It sounds like I'm about to say goodbye, but I'm absolutely not, because it is this time that we answer viewer questions. Blair's like, what are you doing? Don't say goodbye. I got some questions to answer. Let's take this first one from Hannah, asking, how do you think KJ Bolden compares to last year's #1 safety, Caleb Downs? Juicy question.
I think KJ Bolden may be a little bit more athletic and not as physical as Caleb Downs. I thought Caleb Downs was, pound for pound, maybe one of the most talented and physical defensive backs in that 2023 class. We got to see him really late in the recruiting cycle in San Antonio at the All-American Bowl. And KJ Bolden I saw a couple months ago at a 7-on-7 tournament in Las Vegas, the battle tournament up there, and he's just super athletic, a guy that can cover a ton of ground, plays a bit of a center fielder role, if that makes sense, out there, backpedaling, tracking the football, closing quickly on whoever's out there trying to, I guess extend the secondary or get behind the defense. So a bit of a different type of safety, but both immensely talented. And what was interesting, Emily, is that we heard Steve Wiltfong say that Alabama is a serious player, and anytime Nick Saban is involved with a player, especially of the caliber of a KJ Bolden, I don't know, I just start to get kind of goosebumps, because I wonder what that secondary could look like with a KJ Bolden, with the athleticism and the physicality and just the sheer muscle mass. I think bowling ball pin guy that is Caleb Downs. So that'd be a really interesting makeup if they were both to end up there playing together for the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, I mean, that could rival what we see at Colorado right now. If we got those two guys, I mean, just no-fly zone, I think is what they call it, what the kids call it. We got another question here from W. Bailey asking, who are some leaders for Kobe Black?
Well, Kobe Black was just at Texas A&M this past weekend, took a visit there. He's an in-state prospect, and I think anytime the Aggies are involved with an in-state prospect, you have to like their chances, but there's a number of other schools also in the mix. He's going to be at LSU this coming weekend, Emily, and the Tigers are a huge factor in this battle. They obviously go into the state of Texas quite a bit, and especially when it comes to defensive backs, they've been known to produce their share of star playmakers that eventually make it to the NFL. And then you have the other schools, right? The Alabamas, the Georgias, the Ohio States, the normal schools that you would hear for a player of his caliber. Texas also there trying to make a dent in his recruitment. So those are some of the contenders right now. He's been taking some visits, College Station last weekend, Baton Rouge this coming weekend. I'm sure he will be taking a few other visits before he starts settling on the officials, but the officials will be huge for Kobe Black, and it's going to be a name I think we're going to continue to hear about here on the viewer questions. So I'm brushing up, Emily, on my Kobe Black information.
Comfy. I mean, get ready, because people are going to continue to ask about him. It's a very easy name, too, to remember. It's a great name. We got a lot of good names in this class, by the way. That needs to be maybe a future segment when things are kind of slow.
We need to come up with like an all-name team.
I mean, with Aaron Noland and Nitro Tuggle on today's show, we got some pretty epic names here. I promise we're not just answering questions about corners, but apparently we are just defenders. Where does Oregon stand with Elijah Rushing?
Yeah, another player I think that we're going to have to keep mentioning until he comes off the board this summer. He will be taking another unofficial visit to Oregon in a couple weeks. He will be there for that April 25th spring practice, which is going to be big for him to get up to Eugene again after making it up to Autzen Stadium in November to see the Ducks play Washington. He's already set an official visit with Oregon as well for the first weekend of June, so that will be a return trip for him this year. They are firmly in the mix for this one. I think they would be maybe a top 2, top 3 school for Elijah Rushing, considering Dan Lanning's presence in this battle. He's been maybe the most active head coach recruiting him. The other one being Marcus Freeman, who also is right there jostling for position.
Those
and
young guys.
possibly leading the way right now. I think Notre Dame has a lot of buzz for Elijah Rushing. He will also be taking an official visit to Notre Dame. He's got Arizona on the list. He's got Tennessee on the list. A couple other schools getting involved: Michigan, Washington, Ohio State, Miami, right? We talked about him recently with Jason Taylor and the Spider-Man meme. So Elijah Rushing, a huge target for Oregon. They will get him on campus here in a couple weeks, and then again in the summer for an official visit. So you have to like where the Ducks sit right now.
Sometimes I think that our website, 247sports.com, and all the rankings are, for us and for viewers and fans, but honestly, thinking about the list of all those, it's probably good for the prospects too to keep track of all the offers that they have. They can go to their profile and remind themselves, have I gotten an offer here? Have I visited here? Because that sounds like
I'm always
full-time
interested,
job.
Emily, that I get messages sometimes from kids, right, who have dozens and dozens of offers, and they're like, hey, you guys didn't add this other offer that I got 3 weeks ago. Could you add that? And I don't know how they do it, but if it were me, I would lose track of all of those, especially once you get into the double digits. But it's always interesting to kind of hear their feedback, because they're definitely keeping a close tabs on it.
Oh, yeah. As an adult, I don't think I could handle it, but like rewind back to when I was, 15, 16, 17, definitely could not have handled all of those offers. But that's, the price you pay when you're really good at football. You're going to get a lot of offers. Speaking of really good at football, where does USC stand with Brandon Baker?
I think they're still firmly in the mix there as well. Brandon Baker is often mentioned with the big offensive line schools, the Oregons, Ohio State, Alabama. USC is definitely making a huge push there for him. I'm not sure if he will be making it to the Coliseum. There's usually some late additions to that visitor list for the Trojans. They've got their spring game this weekend. But I would assume that they will be a constant presence at modern day practices with Aiden Breland and a few other guys like Elijah Brown, the quarterback, who's number 2 in the top 24/7 among that position. So yeah, Brandon Baker, a huge target for USC. I think he likes them, but he's definitely been keeping his options open and making sure he's making the best decisions. So I would assume that the Trojans will be in the mix right there heading into the summer as well.
I love it. Thank you for those viewer questions. By the way, we are 1 like away from 150, so just go ahead and hit it. Maybe those people that are going back and forth with Brian Kelly and Marcus Freeman talk. I mean, I've been watching them the entire time during this chat. If you have a second from your discussion, I'll call it a discussion, that's a nice way of saying it, go ahead and hit that like button so we get 150 on the way out. For Blair Angulo, I'm Emily Proud, and this is the College Football Recruiting Show.